Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tim, and welcome to Tim Talks, the show that's only partially a show, but really is just an excuse for me to talk to my very talented friends. And speaking of talented friends, I have another one here with me today. He is the lead developer on the upcoming mod Fallout Lonestar, Christopher Means. Welcome, sir.
Howdy.
Christopher, which do you prefer?
Christopher. It just stands out in the crowd, yeah.
Fair enough. As well as the Green Mohawk does.
So my wife can find me.
Fair enough. Yeah. It makes for a good meeting point later on. Just go with the guy with the green mohawk.
Yeah, it works.
So, for those who may not be well aware of what you're doing, tell us sort of a Reader's Digest version of the project you're working on.
Oh, sure. It's essentially we want to do a total conversion mod of Fallout New Vegas and set it in somewhere that Fallout has never really even touched on. Like there's almost nothing said about Texas in general. It's a interesting place, and we thought it would be nice to be able to set a lot of original content there. And as soon as we came up with that idea, we just kept getting bigger and bigger, and we wanted to settle for less. And we'll probably all be killed by it one day.
Yeah, labors of love are exactly that. Both labors and love. I mean, the thing is, you wouldn't be doing a project like this, obviously, if you didn't really love the Fallout series.
Well, yeah. I mean,
we'll get into that and how that kind of spurred the creation of this. But a total conversion mod, what does that mean?
Well, that basically means that it doesn't have any connection to New Vegas. We've already created a world space, which is just basically the box everything in with terrain, and we wanted to make sure that everything in it was original. So you don't play as the courier; it's not the courier coming to Texas. You would play a completely different character, go through a completely original storyline, with as few connections to the Fallout universe as not the Fallout universe, but things that
you have the engine, but other than that is pretty much a new game.
Right. I mean, we essentially have what Obsidian had to make New Vegas. Obviously, they have some funding and other things like that.
Yeah.
Larger staffs of amazing people.
Hundreds of people.
Yes.
Hundreds of billions of dollars. Just a couple of things that might help them.
A couple of things that you might need if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that's what we realize is it's all there. Now, obviously, that doesn't make it simple, but
but it does make it not impossible.
Exactly. I don't know. It was the opportunity was there. I mean, it started out as like a personal project of mine where it was just one town, and I was just going to try to kind of, do as little exposition as possible directly to the player and just kind of give them the idea of what Texas might be like. Right. And just more people got involved, and we suddenly realized there wasn't really the only thing that was stopping us from having this larger world space was just effort. And so we thought, well, we'd like to get noticed because all of us want to, pursue careers in the games industry.
Obviously, yeah.
Well, it's like, you say that though, but a lot of modders really don't have that kind. Don't really. It's more of a personal passion or a hobby.
I guess I can really see that, honestly, because a lot of these become such labors of love. There's that it's the same kind of selling out mentality, I guess it can be. Maybe I'm completely way off.
It's the there are communities of modders, and sometimes it's kind of within the family. They do it as a testament of effort to one another. Things like that. It's hard to explain, but I see what you mean by the selling out thing. Like bands who don't necessarily, play music for large appeal to the masses.
Right.
They
really do it because for the love of the game.
Yeah, love the music and their peers. I think that's the best way to explain it. Is that there are a lot of modders who mod for and amongst their peers. And obviously, we're not against that, but everyone started as someone who's kind of in that periphery where you're like, they have talent, but they just don't have that initial experience that tends to get you kind of into the clubhouse.
Yes. And breaking into any entertainment business, whether it be video games, movies, television, whatever, has such a huge barrier to entry because of that. Because of that, the starting point is a very well-kept secret. Yeah. I mean, you're looking at like black robe, cloak and dagger type shit as far as the actual first step to getting in there. And a lot of people don't really understand that it's getting the base knowledge from books and it's getting the base experience from real world. You have to do both, and that's making those meet is the secret to making the spark jump that lets you do work.
No, you're absolutely right. It's the I think in the games industry, film may or may I couldn't speak for film, but I can only assume there's always this large amount of free work you can do, and then eventually you make contacts and things like that, and but no one really wants to take a chance on you, and for perfectly good reasons. I mean, games like movies have large budgets and things like that, so the problem comes when you have people who have specific talents, but you aren't like. There are these, independent developers who are these just wunderkind, amazing people who just start to finish make their game, and that's a pretty rare breed. But you still have all these really talented people. For example, like concept artists. We were lucky enough to have a lot of concept artists to help kind of express our idea, because that's how you start. You try to give the idea of what we want to do, and then bring people on so they understand what the vision is, what our end goal should look like. Best case
that
scenario.
segues nicely into my next question. You have a team now.
Yes.
It has grown from just a passion project to your team. So let's mention them. Who is your team?
Well, I mean, it changes obviously because this is a volunteer project, so we have people come in and out. It started with myself and a few other people. We have myself, a guy named Jack Shipley, who is a writer and kind of one of our producers, keeps things in line. He has a background in, like management and things like that. So
okay. Yeah.
What we try to do is
the whip cracking portion.
Well, what we try to do is we try to take whatever you currently have as a skill base, and then if you want to learn something else, that's always really good because you can be a writer, but it's also really good for you to have experience using toolkits and actually like and entering dialogue into a toolkit and things like that.
Yeah.
So you bring something to bear and we let you learn something else, and hopefully everybody gets more than just the experience out of it, but they also get to try to learn something and kind of
you get brought in not so much for your current skill set, but I mean, yes, current skill set is a lot of it, but you get brought in a lot for your potential as well.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that I think in the industry, it's good to be able to spread yourself across a few disciplines, especially if you're going to be working interdisciplinarily.
Oh God, yes. Especially if you ever intend to be a lead on any project.
Yeah, absolutely. And so
because you have to be able to communicate effectively.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so and you don't want those barriers to entry, because a lot, you look at a lot of these, ads for, jobs, and you're like, well, you need experience doing all these things. And like myself, my background's in publishing, writing, and journalism. And so I came into this as a writer, but, we're a dime a dozen. A really good writer is something that's very hard to prove.
Yeah.
It's all just too long, didn't read, no matter what it is.
Ain't that the ruddy truth? And you... No, go on.
Sorry. No. I was just gonna say, but then you have, and this isn't an easier discipline, but like a gift of say being an artist is what you see is what you get for the most part. But even then, we had like, moving on from I guess your earlier point, we have all these concept artists, whose, what you see is what you get. It's true, but also a lot of their art starts out as just learning art, personal art, making art for kind of art's sake to show their technique, but being able to interpret a design and express that design in a functional way is very difficult to express. So one of our earliest artists, which are all from Eastern Europe, no, Western Europe, excuse me. No, Eastern Europe. Yeah, I was right the first time. There's Bogna Goranska, who is actually currently not with us at the moment. She actually got picked up by an indie studio.
To make decks. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
That's very good. Yeah. So she's over with, I believe, I want to say it's Dreadlock Studios. I could be wrong about that. But no, she was very, very talented. And I think one of the, her and also Yana Dimitruk, which I just really hope I pronounced that right. She's our environmental artist. One of the things that I feel like brought them in was the desire to be able to take a concept and express it as a, you know, because there's a lot of interpretation. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a middle artist, just enough to get the idea across for the most part. But be able to give them an idea with some, amateur art and say, this is the feeling we want to go for, because that's what Fallout is. It's a series of just walking in and having a big feeling.
It really
and then
is.
shooting something.
It's a bunch of showrooms.
It is.
And
Yeah.
they're very impressive showrooms with a lot to do in them. But you walk in, and every place that you go to is made to make you feel that awe
Yes, exactly.
in the old sense of the word.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, you should be kind of, dumbstruck with emotion, I think,
Mm-hmm.
because Fallout is at its very heart an environmental narrative. And I would say this is different from, say, like Skyrim, because, like, you could say Fallout is locked in its own zeitgeist. It's just you have these two layers of these two worlds existing almost at the same time that you can see sort of just scorched into the walls.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Skyrim, you have forests that kind of hide a lot of what the larger narrative is.
I see.
Yeah. Whereas Fallout, it's all over the place. Every poster, every billboard is a sad story about the past.
A world decimated.
Yeah, everything lost.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
And that's something that a designer thinks of.
Yep.
Most people only think about, oh yeah, no, when I noticed the things were bad. But they can't really articulate the actual meanings behind what they're feeling. They can only realize that they're feeling a thing. But as a designer, you have to be able to take those ethereal emotions that you encounter in the real world and be like, hey, I want to take that idea and twist it and twirl it into my own thing and plug it into here because I think it'll work really well for this one moment to kind of
Sure.
make you. I did a video recently about some sun footage, and it led me to a new word, a French word, Frisian. And it's that feeling that happens when you get spine tinglies and your goosebumps go up
Oh,
and
really?
you get that welling up of emotion. And yeah, that's that feeling. And that's what you, as a designer, as someone who creates a world, try to do.
Well, yeah. Well, I will say myself and many others, because I feel like
Yes.
yeah, it's a lot of conversations and making sure that everybody understands the same everybody wants to evoke the same emotion, and because that's like I said, that's what I think is most important. Like not everyone's going to notice that. To take a tip from the guys over at Red Letter, it's just because you didn't see it doesn't mean your brain didn't. Doesn't mean it wasn't recognized, made part of the moment.
Right.
So yeah, fall, and it's always different too. Fallout 3's, emotional I guess breadth is very different from New Vegas, and we want ours to also be very different. I think that was another thing. It's as we were starting, I wanted to just make sure that we separated ourselves tonally from the other two. If we were going to make something and it was going to be so different, that tone should also be different. There's always the Fallout backdrop, but you want that sort of pervasive spice that only you.
So then that leads to my other question: why Texas? What is it about that lends to that emotion that you want?
Well, one thing was we wanted to. I didn't want to step on any lore. I'm a big fan of not. I don't like using other people's stories. I'm not like I wouldn't. I'm not. There are a lot of reasons not to, but I wouldn't write fan fiction. That's what I'm trying to say. I didn't want this to feel like fan fiction. I didn't want to take the story of Fallout and say that the NCR did this or the Brotherhood of Steel did that. Those aren't really mine. The whole damn universe isn't really mine. But
at least this way, you kind of get the well, I used your stuff to make my own thing excuse. It's not plagiarism.
right.
I guess is the word that I'm looking for.
I feel like a universe and a story, you can separate the two. I can
Yes.
you can it's like Star Wars or
Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, yeah, especially especially Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, which is funny because like as a kid, I remember wanting to play. I had friends who want to do Forgotten Realms, and I would always be like, why don't we just make our own? In case we want to
Yeah.
set Freeport on fire or something. I'd like to know that. I'd like to know that everywhere that city's been burned to the ground. That no one else
I
is gonna
mean,
play
look, no one says that you can't take a laser into Northwind Dale and blow a hole in the mountains,
That's what I'm
okay?
saying.
You can do that. It just, requires some tweaking. Maybe a wish spell or two now in 5th edition. I am a
they bring that
huge
back?
nerd. Huge nerd.
I didn't know if
yes,
they kept the wish
they
spell.
did. They did,
I
actually. It's still a 9th level spell.
I was reading a dungeon magazine from like 1990 that I found in a box when I moved, and they're talking about wish spells because this is all 2nd edition. And I'm like, oh god, do we still do wish spells? Because that's such a weird spell.
It is a hugely overpowered spell, and they've tried to take measures to counteract it. In fact, it's a huge, 2 sections are devoted to it in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So that way you as a Dungeon Master know how to fuck to deal with this fucking spell. Because it's a really great mechanic, but...
I assumed it was just there to kill the Tarrasque. Like, that was just the.
That's mostly what people use it for. But anyway, yes, so getting things that people create and making other things out of them that are tertiarily connected could be going on at the same time, but not directly related.
Exactly. No, and that's the thing. Like, the time period we set it in, which oh god, someone's gonna get mad at me because I'm not entirely certain what the year is. I want to say it's 2250, but I'm probably wrong. The idea is that we wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time to set things up so that Texas is isolated in the canon, which is really great. But it's also there's nothing. It's so far away from everyone else that there's not even really you couldn't really make the argument that a lot of people have been there.
Right.
And now I will say that Brotherhood of Steel took place in a few places of Texas. It took place in one of them was Carbon, which I didn't know was a city in Texas, and I found out I think their population's 300.
Sounds about Falloutian.
Yeah, but Brotherhood of Steel got kind of non-canoned, so by Bethesda, and we were fine with that because they didn't really establish much. And
it certainly worked well in your favor.
Yeah, and it's big enough, and it's also there were a lot of things that went into it. One of which was we wanted to think about brand recognition. Outside of the United States has a intense Fallout following. Apparently, everyone is really interested in a game series where the United States has been destroyed.
Who knew?
Right? But at the same time, though, they're aware of Texas. Texas, you can... I mean, I've left the United States, and I can say, oh, where are you from? I'm from the United States. Oh, where? Texas. And they know what that is.
Most people, when they do an American of some kind, it's either a New Yorker or a Texan.
I found that to be mostly true. Yeah.
Those are the two archetypes that get... Yes, those are the two archetypes that get done most often in movies and television.
Yeah.
It's what people know.
Yeah, and that's fine. Fallout is about these strange sort of jingoistic extremes, and I thought coming from Texas, I understand that's still pretty accurate. So we thought
the more and more you talk about it, it's a great place.
Yeah, it is. Now the only problem is, of course, that it's extremely large, and once you get
a whole shit ton of nothing.
It's true. And once you get into it, you realize, I started looking at cities, and I'm from Dallas.
Well, I think we dropped the call. We're gonna fix that, and we'll be right back in just 1 second. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, as I was saying, I'm from Dallas, and I wouldn't want to set it in Dallas because I don't think anyone really outside of Texas, they don't really have an idea of what any of the cities are like. Austin has a pretty good reputation these days, and people know of Houston and they know of Dallas, usually for the TV show Houston for NASA. So it became pretty obvious that because we can't set it all over Texas. You could, but it would be. It would defeat the purpose of the open world expansion part. Yeah, and we would have to make really constrained locations in different cities, and that would mean making a lot of artificial barriers because there's not a lot to stop people from wandering around in Texas. There are no
exactly
or anything. So I realized El Paso would be a really good one because for a couple of reasons. One, it fits the Western aesthetic, which is something we'll talk about in a second, and then it's small, which is something that we're happy about because we can't build a really really large city. You know,
But it's dense. You can
yeah,
make it
it's
dense.
dense and mostly in a lot of desert, and so we can a lot like with Las Vegas is that you could kind of make it sort of cellular. You could have a nice suburban area here, a nice urban area here, a nice whatever here, et cetera, and you can
Yeah.
kind of sort of polish out the edges, and everything has a nice kind of back and forth. But also Mexico, because we've
El
gone.
Paso is right on that border.
Yeah, we figured it's been, I don't know, 4 or 5 games, and we've never really left the country. And
Yeah.
we know like Canada got annexed in the great or before the Great War during the Resource Wars, and so I don't know. I'm not as interested in what happened to Canada. No offense to Canada or anything. It's just I feel like narratively it's not going to be jump out
I
at you
feel like it's
awesome.
going to be that Alaska DLC from Fallout 3.
A little, which I have points of view on that, but
Yeah.
it's
The Tesla cannon is probably my favorite thing in Fallout ever.
sure. It's just
But the rest of
it
it,
was mostly kind of like a Call of Duty sort of shoot 'em up, and I would have really loved to have seen Anchorage at some point, or
I'll
just
stop you when you're wrong.
yeah.
I
So,
mean,
but like I understand why they did it. Someone had an idea of like, why don't we, really get into like show the Great War at some point, or not the Great War. I'm sorry, the war with China. And I mean,
and it was decent enough way to do it
I think so. Like,
without for being its first DLC, if I remember right.
that's correct.
And really one of the first big DLC packs that came for an Xbox 360 game, if I remember right.
I don't remember, to be honest. I played it on PC. So.
Fair enough. Yeah. It tried some things that didn't work very well that in the other DLC packs that followed, they did better on.
I think the only thing it really missed was just the story. I felt like the story could have been more inclusive. I could have learned something. There were
Absolutely.
places where you do learn about the because I mean that's me. I'm a lore whore. I love. I will go through every terminal looking for tiny scratches of what happened to Nuka-Cola during the passion fruit famine or something like that, and you're like, that is so neat.
Just anything that you can get.
And no one else is going to be thinking that. They're going to be thinking, what's really cool is when I blow this guy up in the certain way. I'm just like, looking at
Slow
charts.
motion bats.
Right.
Slow motion bats.
Exactly. So, but no, I mean, but you talk about Canada, and then you go Canada or Juarez, which, if you're not familiar with Juarez, it's not doing so great at the moment.
Yeah.
But that being said, that's like on our wish list, because we don't want to do Mexico until we can actually talk to some people who have lived there.
Right.
Because
you want to do it justice. I mean, if you're going to all this work to make a project, you may as well make it right.
Well, not only that, because I feel like you could represent it a bit. But I think the bigger thing is that Fallout tends to take the piss out of wherever it's set.
I see.
And nothing is worse than trying to take the piss out of somewhere you've never been and with the people who you don't really connect with. I'm very good at being white. So, big American values are kind of my thing.
Yeah,
but,
you're very easy to make fun of Texas.
Yes, exactly. I can make fun of Texas, but you go to Mexico, and you could guess, but you'd be making a lot of the stereotypical jokes and things like that. I'd really like to know, like, because right now they're having problems with cartels, and I think right now it's like petroleum hijacking and things like that. But,
yeah, what really are the things that you
Right.
could bite into?
But and that's interesting. I mean, a lot of like I think it was with the bridge, which I think was on AMC, or it could have been. I think it was AMC. I'm not really sure.
Yes.
That's their thing. And I mean, it's a show in El Paso, and it deals with the cartels. But we'd like to have someone's opinion on just like what is the thing that you think is stupid about your country that you also think is funny.
Right.
Because as Americans, usually
Right.
we can think of about 20 or so things that we think is dumb, which is why we also decided we wanted to build the large border wall, because we thought that's a natural thing that should have happened in Fallout. Is that at some point they would have gone.
It feels like a natural extension to the world.
Yeah, because it's all about jingoism. It's all about it's all about things run amok without limits. No one said
Hmm.
it's kind of, Fallout is a world where no one says no. you know?
And I mean, really, like, it's so ridiculous in that not only is it literally a wall between countries that, does the thing keeping people out, blah, 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 but because you call it the Great Wall, it's absolutely a middle finger to China, which the whole game already, that's already established in the game that America does that. Like,
I
it's
never
so
thought about
great
that.
on so many
That's
levels.
actually, you know what? I've never actually because the Great Wall is like it was literally the first and worst thing I could think of, and I was like, that's a terrible name. Well, I've
No,
got
it's
nothing
the
better.
perfect
But
name.
yeah, with the China connection, I honestly never put two and two together about that. That we're gonna have to use that because
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
there's gonna be all this anti-Chinese propaganda everywhere anyway.
and it makes so much sense to kind of take it back to the old west world, but at the same time it really isn't going back like
Well,
that
no,
hard to
no.
get to the racial stereotypes that all of that time period is framed around.
Well, I mean, you got to remember, like that was another thing is I really enjoyed the Western themes in Fallout New Vegas. I thought they were great,
Hmm.
but at the same time, in a lot of ways, New Vegas had so many goals that I feel like they didn't get to really.
What was the DLC in the Grand Canyon?
Oh, on the starts. That was in
Thank you.
Zion
Yeah.
Canyon, yeah. Um, there was a lot of I think that half of it they wanted to do, Las Vegas, and then the other half they wanted to do kind of a Western. And don't get me wrong, I love that game. The only reason I even nitpick it this day is that I played it so many times.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of
After a
those
while,
things
you're just like the seams get a little more obvious, but it's not really anyone's
you
fault.
really do notice those things about projects that you love more because you pay attention. You're
Right.
you're digging in. You're like, God, I just wish it was perfect like I wanted it to be.
It's just actually usually it's just the kind of things that you realize what they were shooting for, and you kind of wish they'd had the time to do it. Because I mean, people make the
Yeah.
comparisons, but then they forget. Obsidian had a budget, and they had a time limit. Whereas as we all know, Bethesda sort of just whenever they feel like it.
Does as they do,
Yeah.
and it's ready when it's ready, which is a great
Yeah.
model for doing things, but most companies can't do that.
No, and since they were contracted out by by Bethesda and ZeniMax, they did everything they could in the time that they had with the money that they were allotted, and I think they did an amazing job. And then all I could think was just I love these Western aesthetics, and then when you really think about it, and as we did all this research on Western films and things like that, it became really obvious that the Western and the post-apocalyptic film are basically the same show, except
Cowboys and Aliens, I think, is a great example of that.
a little.
A good recent example of that, I should say.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's also like, I mean, I would never say that if you're going to write something for Fallout, I don't know if you should watch The Road, but that is a depressing movie, and it makes you realize like how awful everything really would be. But no, there really is this kind of Western mentality. It's about because in Fallout Lone Star, we want to focus on each game has had kind of their moral focus, or I guess well, it's sort of moral slash socio-economic point to make. The first one was very much good versus evil. Most of the decisions were binary, and to the Enclave versus the Brotherhood of Steel, it's very good versus evil, and that's
Right.
that's cool. It's completely fine because we're reintroducing Fallout. So you've got even Three Dog even calls it the good fight. It's a very I wouldn't call it overly simplistic, but it's definitely cut.
It's cut and dry.
Yeah. And then with New Vegas, it's all about what happens when you have when the factions really start to become when civilizations start to build again and people are vying over individual resources and things like that. And so you have all these little threads. So we wanted to talk about law and order. And the concept of justice, the idea of who wields justice or law, who is given the authority and where do they get that authority from? Because in the post-apocalypse, and just like in a Western, it's really usually just given to someone or someone takes it.
Yeah.
Your sheriff is anointed by some guy who's usually not even anywhere near that town, or it's just the mayor who decided he is the law for money, usually because he has
Or
money.
the
Something like
richest, scariest,
that. Yeah. Yeah.
the person who can take power.
Right, and of course, the exercising justice or law and order in the West is usually through some kind of violence. And so those are all basically exactly the same in the post-apocalyptic scenario. So we're like, this
Yes.
all lines up. Um, and yeah, so we thought westerns would be really cool. I'm a huge fan of westerns. So the original story is all based on the Magnificent Seven because that's my favorite western, and it's kind
An
of a story
excellent
about a
basis.
guy with a bunch of his companions out, you know, basically doing a quest where
Yeah.
we're gonna save this, the small farming village from raiders, which they are. They're just Mexican raiders. They have no other backstory other than they are just a bunch of
Basically, they're
assholes.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not even like a race thing. I mean, it's Mexican raiders that they're coming to, basically raid a Mexican farming village, and then
Yeah.
Yul Brenner is essentially you. You're, or and everyone else is just a companion. He literally picks up through a series of fetch quests, just like you would in New Vegas.
And so that seems like the perfect thing to put into a game. I mean, it really does translate over magnificently. Ha 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 ha.
Well, like, yeah,
And
that brings up, yeah, our that's our farm is the tribe of Magnifico. Yeah, we decided. But that's another theme. It's like the first game is water, and the second game is electricity or just general power. These are themes that go throughout Fallout. It's always something, and we wanted
yeah,
to do food because
right.
while it's never really addressed, I feel like in the first game, food would run out a lot faster than water. Even today, like right now, we're really good at filtering out water for the most part.
And I mean, food was often way more irradiated
It's true.
anyway in the Fallout
Yeah,
universe.
no, I mean I get it though, because obviously water, it's something you can easily grasp onto. Like you get the idea of water. You can also you'll die faster without water than you would with food.
Absolutely.
So we thought, let's focus on food. Also, there's all these great foods in Fallout. All these little items you pick up, and not until New Vegas did they even really matter beyond like
Just being
health
flavor.
or health. Yeah, I mean basically they're basically stim packs with a little
Yeah.
bit of background.
But they'd be like lizard on a stick.
Yeah, we have lizard on
And
stick,
shit.
or like Dandy Boys and Salisbury steak, and all these things that like
Hmm.
basically are the things we all hate, but happen to survive because they're like saturated in preservatives. Nuka-Cola is around because it's been sealed. It's all flat,
Yeah.
but it's still in there. And that's interesting. And it also realized you could create great steaks with that, and that's a terrible pun, but the ever-present idea of famine was something we really liked. And like in New Vegas, you could pick food off the ground. It was growing in the desert. So comparatively speaking, it's lusher than say Fallout 3, where it's all about scrounging. So food becomes, if you can't grow it, food in Fallout becomes this. It's like gold. It's something you have to find,
Right.
and there's a limited amount of it out there. So what happens when that starts to? And so we decided with Texas, we would just make it where it's like, not only is it like Fallout 3, but we've made it so that the ground is it's just the worst.
Salted.
Yes, exactly. It's a plains state. So everything just it's we like to say that it was something I actually picked up from the Fallout Bible. They said the great storm, the great twisters of Texas had repelled somebody or something or other, and I thought that would be really cool. But if there's storms, they're just going to sweep across the state, and that means they're
Right.
picking up ash, particulates. And then we watched Ken Burns' The Dust Bowl, and
I was gonna say
you really should watch that because there's some things about the Dust Bowl that I don't think most people are aware of. One, it was man-made. Like we caused the Dust Bowl through over farming. We pulled up all the topsoil, and there was just nothing to stop the wind, and so it just picked up everything that was under the topsoil. And there would be these walls of just black clouds that
Yeah.
went like a mile in the sky, and they did weird shit. Like it actually built so much electricity, so much static electricity that it would kill crops by electrocution.
What?
Yeah, isn't that neat? Terrible.
That's insanity.
Yeah, I mean seriously, it's a really cool documentary because it's just you don't realize how insane it is. It's really like something out of, I mean, like Lord of the Rings or something, the giant black wall of death that just, you know.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if we could do that with
Huh.
farming, I wonder what would happen if you just dropped just dozens and dozens of nukes everywhere. And so,
And just literally made it a parking lot.
yeah, I mean, yeah, and the idea is that we wanted to keep these kind of oppressive clouds of, well, this is something we haven't figured out how to do. A lot of this is in theory because,
Yeah.
a lot of this is trying to get the GEC to do things it was never meant to do, and there are things we may have to just allude to because we don't have the actual ability to make them happen within the GEC.
Right.
But one thing we'd really like to have, and if not actually have happen, at the very least be able to say happens, are these black blizzards, that are irradiated clouds of, fallout and ash and glass particulates. I mean, from just
Right.
the glassing of the explosions. And make this, make it a hellhole. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, like
I mean,
it's gonna make
that's what it would be.
Yeah.
And it would give you the excuse to kind of confine activity
Yes.
to areas that would be protected
yeah,
from these storms,
Right.
shelters and towns and places like that.
Exactly.
And you would kind of,
yeah. Thank
interesting.
you. That's what we sit around and think about because also it makes nice natural barriers too. Our world space is actually our world space was designed by a guy named Miles Wimbrow, who on the forums he goes by Tricky Vein, brilliant guy. He basically fed the topographical data for the El Paso area into the GEC and just created the terrain. And it was
Wow.
pretty genius. And so, once we had that, we realized, there's one chain of mountains, and then there's the southern border, and then there's nothing else to stop the player from just wandering off the edge of the map. So we thought, okay, that's another good use of these, these weather
Perennial snowstorm.
Kind of,
Just,
yeah.
black blizzard. Just.
It's a lot better than being told there's nothing there, which I believe there's a place in Fallout 3 where you could try to go up a road and it tells you there's nothing interesting out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
No reason to go there.
Well, yeah, it's always interesting to find a way within your means to relay the ideas that you have in an interesting manner. It's just, you can tell the player something, and that's well and good.
Yeah.
But if you can show them,
Oh yeah.
that's
Show don't
that's
tell.
a million
Absolutely.
times better.
Absolutely. It's one of these things where whatever we can't do, we'd like to at the very least. You don't tell the player that they happen, but you try to get all the, the environmental markers of that happening. Like the general color is sort of a bluish gray, to the sand because we assume there's a lot of ash involved. And then when we started building, various areas and sets, it's all sand. So like Miles would come in and build, he built all these textures so we could have these smooth sand effects. And then everything we started tracking where we want the wind to always be blowing so that we would know the sand would collect on the side of objects because
Right.
it's always there. And it's not like it's just has stopped blowing. It's just always going to be kind of pushing, sand and kind of burying things slowly. Because, we have the idea that, especially northern Texas, actually, it goes all the way down to Austin technically, but the Lonestar Confederacy thinks of the El Paso or the pass where you're playing as a worthless shithole, not barely worth keeping within the Confederacy, as they spend most of their time trying to save Austin from being destroyed. So that's why when Magnifico occurs, it's the discovery that someone has figured out how to grow food, and that makes them instantly important.
So I have one last question before we start to wrap things up
Sure.
here. Who are you playing as?
The Ranger.
Interesting. Texas Ranger.
Yes. Or Lone Star Ranger, but yeah.
Yep. And so, like, what is are there any details you want to drop with that? Because that's an interesting
Sure.
way to start.
No, basically
Especially with the Law and Order
yes,
theme that we
right.
talked about earlier.
Well, that was the thing is we wanted westerns for the dramatic backdrop, and then cop shows for the more hilarious front drop. So But because you need the humor. Fallout has to have humor, and I kind of feel like that's where a
Yeah.
lot of mods it gets forgotten because there's all these games that are in your mind, and then you put them into Fallout, and then you forget all the really stupid, hilarious shit that happens in Fallout. There's a lot of goofy shit in there.
There really is, and a lot of that, especially when you get into fan projects like fan fictions and fan art and fan mods like this, they usually tend to focus on the more serious
Yes.
aspects of the project, not because they forget about, like, it is because they forget about the comedy,
Yeah.
not because they intentionally don't want it to be funny. They
Yeah.
just forget that that was such a key component to what they love.
They remember that it's important, and I think when you think of something that's important, you find that it's hard to ridicule, and so that's where the humor goes. It's like it's always you always got to remember, like Greek gods were considered to be foolish and stupid, you know, so they could have a more of an interesting point of view on religion,
Absolutely.
And that's the thing is, you have to figure out where you want to be kind of dumb, where do you want things to work poorly, and so the Confederacy employs the Rangers, and they're very much like the Texas Rangers are today and were back then, which is half myth and half crazy person because obviously no one really knows who the Texas Rangers are outside of Texas. But a quick rundown is basically they were like the FBI for Texas.
Right.
They're usually gunslingers who were criminals who are now working for the government, and they had the great power of myth. People thought they were awesome. The old
Wyatt Earp.
yeah, well, yeah, no, and a lot of guys. Bat Masterson, a bunch
Yep.
of other guys. But I mean, the overall their catchphrase was one riot, one man, or one man, one riot. I can't remember. I think it's one riot, one man. The idea being that if you have a huge disturbance of the peace that requires a ranger, you only need one of them.
Yeah.
Which makes them sort of like Old West Jedi, But
Typically speaking, yeah, especially when you combine the mythos with the actual job that they do.
right, and so we decided to combine that with like all of the tropes from cop shows, because this is also a lot of people looking back on what is now history, which for us would be like the future, and in reinterpreting it and in the worst ways. Obviously, the Elvis School of Impersonation is the most important poster child for we looked back and totally got it wrong. A bunch of guys who find a place where everyone's living and talking like some exalted leader, and it just turns out to be an Elvis impersonation school where the king is reigns supreme. So yeah, but we also wanted to make sure that like the Texas Rangers of the pre-war were also kind of stupid, and overpowered, and so a lot of those tropes of like your Dirty Harry, Law and Order, basically all of these things kind of come up in the kind of doing things. Whenever you do something officially, we want you to have this feeling like you're actually a law enforcement officer, because actually, Jack Shipley, our producer, he came up with one of the most important phrases, which was he never got to be the courier, and that always bugged him. Is that he was never the courier. You were never a mailman. You were
Interesting.
You literally start your day getting fired by being shot.
Yeah. Yeah. You never actually, unless you specifically take the choice and make sure that you make all the non-choices that you can, you never actually deliver that fucking chip.
Well, yeah. I mean, even then, it's like you don't. You're not really a courier if you just carry one thing once. It was. You never got to be the person.
That's yeah.
And we thought it would be really cool to actually be like an enforcement officer and actually carry out the law of the land occasionally and do your job. And then how you do your job matters. Like, are you kind of the dirty cop, or are you the by the books cop?
Yeah. Are you Dirty Harry, or are you the man with no name?
Yeah, exactly. Are you the guys from Dragnet who just just the facts, man?
Yeah. Just the facts, man.
All that stuff matters, because it'll key the player into it. You'll start to pick up the tropes, and I mean we have this whole like, not to get too much into things, but like. Most of these games start with some kind of quiz or thing that gives you an idea of what you want to play, and so we have the Department of Security's entrance exam for the Texas Rangers before the war, and it's all just dirty politics sort of answers. Like, do you you have a lineup. One of the guys did it. How do you convince the witness to pick the right guy? And it's all these really terrible answers.
That's fantastic.
things like that. It's that's what we would really
To
like to do.
go along the lines with the goats and
Yeah.
the God, what was it? What was the awful fucking stat picking system in New
It
Vegas?
was a Rorschach test.
That's
Which
right.
actually has the coolest. I'll just say this as a kind of a shout out to the guys over at Obsidian, but they did actually re-add something from the community into Honest Hearts, which is if you did Wild Wasteland, which by the way that's a whole different conversation as it is. If you had Wild Wasteland, you would go into the tribal area in Honest Hearts, and there would be a tribal named Two Bears High Fiving, because that is what like 90% of the Fallout fans saw when they saw one of the Rorschach tests was two bears high-fiving. And so and they were like there's actually a mod, and the only difference is that it makes to the entire game is that it gives that as an option that you can say it looks like two bears high-fiving. And then later
That's
on, you get in there,
amazing.
it goes, Wild Wasteland. And you're like, what's going on? Then you look, and it's guy named Two Bears High Five, and he's just kind of saying it there, which makes it.
Well, the community is fucking
Oh
amazing.
yeah.
I think that's a pretty good place for us to start to round things out, especially considering all of the passion and all of the love and all of the monster fucking energy drinks behind you
Oh yeah.
that are probably going into this
My
project.
I'll just say this: my wife bought those, and she's a good woman.
Yes. And so, as we love to do when we come to the end of our program, I've always enjoyed the Inside the Actor Studios method of ending on a brief questionnaire. So,
Sure.
I too have a reappropriated version of the Proust Personality Questionnaire, and it goes a little something like this. Christopher, what's your favorite word?
Oh man, that's a good question. Because I've seen the show. I've seen the show. I've never really thought about it. Uh, my favorite word.
It's okay, we'll wait.
Oh, I know. I know. Just edit this. Just kind of cut it right out. Just do like as though I just knew immediately. I would say. I would say it's fun.
That's a good one. What's your least favorite word?
I'm trying to think of something that isn't really filthy. Uh,
That'll come later, I assure you.
I'm gonna go with smegma. I think that's the most just disgusting word and meaning I've ever heard in my life.
What sound or noise do you love?
I'd have to go with when my wife laughs so hard she can't breathe.
And what sound or noise do you hate?
Nail files. I don't know what it is, but it's like just someone on an emery board. I know it's really just like I'm sure that it's for like 90% of people, but it just makes me curl up into a ball. Like I can't take
It's
it.
so oddly specific too. That's the great part about it. What hero or heroine, no judgment here, do you identify with the most?
Like real ones or
Either or.
I would say this is from Marvel's X Factor, and it's a character called the Multiple Man, Jamie Madrox.
I know the multiple man.
Yeah, I like him simply because has a superpower that forces all of his emotion to kind of be on his shoulders.
What was the series that he was in where it was him and a team that he was trying to be in charge of, and they really were not a great team? They were looking for a little girl.
I want to say that was X
God,
Factor, wasn't it?
I think it was
Yeah.
X Factor. I would like a couple of issues of that, and I was never able to finish it. And I
You know what's
absolutely loved
funny?
it.
I actually did the same thing. I picked up one comic, and it was weird because that series had a lot of different artists that came in and out, and it had this really good dialogue, and the character. I just remember it perfectly. The very beginning is they just done something. They came back. One of his duplicates wasn't reabsorbed, and he slept with one of the other teammates. And then, unbeknownst to him, the duplicate was of his libido, and his libido slept with another member of the team on the same night. And so he's
Yes.
walking out and realizing he had that he had
Inadvertently
yeah,
double dipped into the team,
apparently, yeah,
as it
without
were.
having any meaning to. He had done it anyway.
Yeah.
And then he reabsorbs him. He gets all the memories, and then so you have this great moment of like, did he do something wrong, or really did he not? Like that's I love any type of superhero has a quagmire like that regarding their abilities.
What villain or villainess
Oh, That's a good question. Because they never ask that. They never ask you who your favorite villain is. Uh, villains, man.
There's so many good ones.
There are a lot of really good villains out there, and of course your best villain is a villain doing all the wrong things for the right reason.
Yep.
Uh,
You're Ozymandias.
yes, that's true, and he would be a good one if he just isn't such a blonde prick.
It's
I just
true.
can't stand
Like
it.
they just picked the
I'm so
most
handsome.
corporate douche
Like,
to be like the most Abercrombie and Fitch modeled the
yes,
guy
except that he's
to
wearing
be.
tights and everything, and he's just like, oh, no one else is wearing tights now. You're still wearing the tights because you're that guy, you prick. You have everything. I
Yeah.
hate you so much. Um,
Ozymandias.
Man, now I just might say that just because I hate him so much. But I want to say like what a good villain is not because you dislike them, but like I would say a good villain is where it's like you have to put them down and you're not happy about it. I
Mhm.
always like those. So, oh man, I really wish I would like had a chance to prepare. I would have a really good answer.
Oh no,
Yeah, you're not
that's the
allowed to
best
prepare.
part. No, be not afraid of the silence.
I know it's deafening. Oh, actually, I would say one of my favorite villains is, and I don't remember his name, but it was from a movie called Once Upon a Time in the West. And you have a character who is played by Lee Van Cleef, and he's the most suave gunslinger you've ever. I think there's one point where he's just in this. Actually, Ebru, one of our companions, was drawn after him because I mentioned it offhand to one of our artists, and but he has this great. It's like a leather suit almost, and this is for it's a brilliant like Sergio Leone movie, and he's just awesome, but he at the same time doesn't seem to understand why he's the villain
Right.
until the very end.
I'll have to check that out.
It's
I haven't seen
if
that.
you're ever looking for something that is, if you ever wanted to watch a movie with like 15 solid minutes without dialogue, where it's all just cinematography of three guys at a train station waiting to murder someone, and you're just like,
On the edge of your seat.
no, I'm like the whole time you're like, what is about to happen? Who's about to get murdered? And then then you got Charles Bronson shows up, and then suddenly everything just goes to
You're like, oh.
yeah. But through the whole movie, Charles Bronson will tell Lee Van Cleef why he wants to murder him, and it's the best. So it's great to have a villain where it's like he's obvious the villain, but he doesn't know why. Now he's not in a position of power. So I would probably go with him.
What would be your superpower?
I like teleportation. That has always been my answer. I just think Nightcrawler has it best. Fur and everything. I'd take it just to be able to like co-locate. I don't like driving. I don't really like running. Just sounds good to me.
What would be your super weakness?
Oh, that's a good one. Because a good answer would be one that's not easily overcome.
Right. But a really good one would be like a donut.
Mental instability. I would go for some kind of not always a problem. Like borderline personality disorder, or maybe I don't know.
You could be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, man.
Something like that. No, I just you would want to be unreliable. That would be really a lot of fun, especially someone who could teleport, because then you're just like, the minute I've lost my shit, I'm gone, and you don't know why. And then all you can do is just
all of a sudden,
waiting
bam,
for
out.
the awful thing to happen. Or I could just be back at home crying into a pillow. You don't know. Or I might
You don't know.
I might have gone on
You
a
don't
bloody
know.
rampage, or I might be laughing hysterically for no reason. But But then there's times where I'm perfectly normal.
What turns you on creatively? What gets your wheels turning?
Collaboration. I love working with large teams. I think the only thing that I've kind of singled is like my big regret. Not regret, because we didn't have any control over it. But the whole team is so spread out. I don't think we have anyone in the same state, like let alone country. Like we have a few people in the United States, actually quite a few people. I know, I'm not. I'm wrong. I'm sorry. I think we've got 2 people in Mexico. Well, okay, that counts. 2 people in Poland. But I think 2 people are in California too. I want to say that's true.
I guess Poland counts.
They are lovely people, and apparently
Yes.
produce art. We have 3 Polish concept artists, and they're all good. They just produce these really very talented artists who work very hard and are super sweet. Um, but yeah,
But yeah, that collaboration.
collaboration. Oh no, yeah, sorry. No, it's we don't get to sit in the same room and stare at a whiteboard and talk about what we're gonna do next. It's emails and sometimes Skype, but I mean, there are time zones and things, and uh, I would do something really horrible just to be able to get one person within like driving distance that we could collaborate with and actually
I understand.
work with. So that's
What turns you off?
um I would say honestly the thing that gets me the most is I don't want to say lack of vision because I don't want to sound like Palpatine or something, but
Lack of
lack of vision. No, in the sense that you occasionally come across people who have a hard time grasping the larger picture beyond kind of how they influence things. And this happens a lot between, you could probably say, like you're more between your big arty guys and your very straight laced mechanical guys.
Right.
It's really just the old thing between like programming and design, which doesn't happen as much anymore. I gotta say, like I haven't had that personally recently happen, but anytime when you've got someone who just can't seem to, who actually I think really it's just not being able to say you might know something more about how this comes across, or
Right.
and when
Someone who's unable to collaborate because they, for whatever reason.
yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. It's just those moments when you realize that someone would rather do their own thing and have it their way rather than make something really good. And I think that's in any good collaboration, it's the ability to understand that what you had just made, that thing that you think is great, could very literally be a giant pile of shit, and most likely
and
is.
could very easily be improved upon by someone who knows other things than you do.
Yeah.
Who has ideas that you never thought possible.
We definitely tell all our writers that just assume the first thing you put on the board is going to be utter garbage, because of course that's coming as a writer. I mean, that's something you got to learn from the very beginning. It's just you're going to write something terrible, and it's not going to get good until other people see it. But yes, there are people who really don't want to. They have a hard time sort of giving up the ghost, not strangling their children, I think is what you would put it.
Yeah. What other talent would you like to have been gifted with?
I would say drawing. Even though it's something I've actually been getting better at, I kind of wish I had done it earlier, because
Interesting.
I think no one really realizes exactly how. And I'm going to say this very carefully. How simple the process of being good at drawing is, but at the same time, thinking that it's something that you just are gifted with. It's a simple process. It's just a laborious one where it's
Right.
where it's practice and especially nowadays like YouTube. Watching people draw.
I feel like there are some skills where you can shave off a couple of the 10,000 hours that it takes to be an expert at something. Drawing is not one of them.
Not really, no.
By any stretch of the
I
imagination.
think nowadays, this is what I do, because I'm not, like I said, I'm like a solid 5. I wouldn't put myself any higher or lower, but I will say though, if you can take a technological advantage on that, that's always a good thing. Like I can't do charcoal and I can't do pencils. It's all Wacom tablets and Photoshop, because I like to be able to hit undo.
Yeah,
I make a lot of mistakes.
It's a handy dandy feature. Are you kidding me?
A lot of people have to go through their lives, like before then it was just, well, if you screwed up, can you fix it? No. And then it's all out the window,
Shit.
which gives you
What advice would you give to your 13-year-old self?
I would say that there are things you can do. No, when I was a kid, I grew up outside of id Software, and back then it was like, can you make 3D? Can you draw or do models? No. Can you do programming? No. You can do nothing for games. I'm sorry, please leave. That was just kind of the '90s prevailing thought, was that it was just art assets and programming, and that's all that.
Then
And
again, the extent of storytelling in 90s video games was a wall of text presented to you at the very beginning and the very end of the game.
if even that, if even
So,
that much. I mean,
yeah.
your most popular. I mean, even, and of course, even guys got like Guy Carmack, who equate stories in video games to stories in pornography.
Yeah.
That was the point of view. And
And like the thing is, when I said that bookending text wall idea, I was thinking of Doom.
I don't even
Fucking
remember
John
that.
Carmack.
I don't even.
I mean, like you can't escape that.
Yeah.
Like yeah, that was the
Which is
thing.
funny.
So I can understand where that sentiment would come from, but it is so not true
No,
nowadays.
although there's still a problem though, which is that you still get a lot of. That's why a lot of games go wrong, is that they don't realize they need a writer. Usually you'll have a designer who's like, I can put words in a line and put a period at the end. And you get some pretty crummy.
I can make a dialogue tree.
Yeah.
Will that work?
And they don't bring in a proper writer, and that tends to, in my opinion, I think that ruins a lot of games. But that is kind of self-serving of me to say. So,
What is something that only you do?
in life or for the project?
In life.
Oh. Man, only I do. I hope I'm of the opinion that you're a snowflake is like one of the biggest lies ever told. Like there are a lot of people
I agree.
just like you.
But that doesn't mean that there isn't some weird, dorky, or annoying, or shitty habit that you have that you think that only you could possibly be weird enough to do.
All right. I see what you're saying.
I, for example, love to pick the backs of my teeth with the back ends of the toothpicks that you get, the ones that have the dental floss on the front end of them, and then you can get the toothpick part on the back. I love the feeling that it gives me when I pick my teeth clean in the back.
All right.
That's fucking weird,
Okay.
and I know it's weird, and I'm the only person in the world that could possibly think that that's satisfying. I admitted to something. Now it's.
I think everybody tries to kill the fly that's in their house. Because they're annoying, and it makes you feel like you live in a garbage dump, even if it's just because someone flew in the door. I take it personally. I don't know why, but there's something about this carrion insect coming to my house. I feel personally offended every time, and I'm just uncomfortable until it's dead, and then every time it's like it's always the most unceremonious disposal I can think of. It's always the toilet or something like that. And it's not just because it's simple and I can flush the handle. In my mind, I'm like, you deserve this. And then just, because I just do. I hate them.
That's amazing.
I'm easily distracted. So something buzzing around my head, I can't not put my mind on that now. And so I feel like it's robbing me of my moments. So
yeah. What is your favorite curse word?
I'd like to be more original, but I do have to say I do love the word fuck.
It's my favorite too. There's nothing wrong with the old standby.
It's just, it's the consonants of it. It starts with something soft and ends with something hard, and I guess that makes it a good
all
word.
Things that feel great in your mouth.
Yeah,
here we
it's
go.
an appropriate little word, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But no, I mean I probably say it more than I should, to be honest.
Where would you one day like to live?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question, because where I'm currently now is one of the places I wanted to live, the great Northwest.
Yeah.
But if I could say, where would I like to live? Anywhere. I don't know. That's a really good question.
There's nothing wrong with being perfectly content with where you are.
I see, that's just it. Is I'm not. We never have been. I've moved I've moved 5 times in the last 5 years. It's always we were moving closer towards Seattle originally, and we realized that we're in Coma, which is just south of Seattle, and it's basically the industrial version of Seattle, kind of a Dallas to a Fort Worth, or a Chicago to a New York, and I kind of like that. So originally we were like, we'll move slowly up towards Seattle, because Seattle's this trendy place with all the awesome game companies, and that's where we'll be, and everything will be wonderful. And then I was like, then you get to Seattle and you're like, man, this is kind of a pretentious place.
A little bit. A little
Because
bit.
I love love Austin to death. And I will say the one thing they don't have is that they are legitimately too weird to be pretentious.
Yeah, like the thought of pretentiousness usually just doesn't cross the minds of people.
I mean, if you've been there for Eeyore's birthday, I think that's the moment where we realize this is all in earnest.
Yeah,
Oh, and be
basically.
careful. Portland's
Basically.
trying to take the keep what is it
Keep it weird.
keep Portland
Keep
weird.
blank city weird,
Yeah, and
yeah. And it'll never
I
fucking
was
happen because,
I
like,
have
they'll try for a while and then they won't be able to keep it up for long
yeah.
enough because they're just not naturally
No,
weird. Like,
no.
it's not a.
Well, that's true. I will say they are trying really hard, but the thing is, no one cares. There's no one in Oregon
Yeah.
who's like, "Oh, Portland, you're too weird. Stop." They're just like, "All right,
Yeah.
whatever, lumberjacks and crazy
It's
people. That's
true.
fine." But like with Texas, I mean, seriously, you guys are being you guys are literally pressed into a diamond by the rest of the state. I mean, that's just how. And so yeah,
That our own fucking governor called the city a blueberry in the tomato soup.
yeah. I mean, it's so. You guys
It's
need that
so ass
campaign.
backwards. I mean, like, it is Fallout. That's why when I ask why Texas, it's not a leading question. It really is like that flash of brilliance is so great for the setting that you're trying to make here.
Yeah, no,
But
it's
anyway,
great. Oh, and you know what? If anyone has any better names for Austin, I'd love to hear them. I'm really bad about this because we've got San Antonio, and we've got Austin, and we've got Waco, and then El Paso, and then Midland, Odessa, and Dallas.
now I really like that El Paso is named the Pass. Sorry, we'll save that last question for a second because it actually took me a second to realize that the Pass was El Paso.
It's also where you head
I
people off at in westerns.
Exactly. And so, like, it really, you're doing an
you.
excellent job with tying everything together and making a Fallout universe that feels very Texan.
Thank you.
Keep up the
With
good
that
work.
in mind,
I guess
though,
is
if
what I was getting
anyone
to.
has any suggestions for the other cities for which that I can't really represent, because we named Dallas Reunion, and I was fine with that as myself. Fort Worth was Meat
Yeah.
Market. We want to turn because Fort Worth is really pretty, but they have the meat market district, and we thought we'd just turn it into a abattoir of horrible things happening.
Right.
But San Antonio is currently, I think, named Alamo, which is a terrible name in my opinion, and I wish we could come up with something better. And Austin is currently Weird City, and I don't know if that's a
Yeah.
good name or
It's
not.
not. Yeah. It doesn't quite hold the same level of
Yeah.
gravitas as the rest
Right,
of them.
and so like nothing is set in stone. We have the map, drawn out and everything. I put the names on it, but
I think we've actually shown the map already once before.
no.
And yeah, it's right down there now. I love that freaking map. It's so
But
great.
those names aren't set in stone. So like when people contact us from like San Antonio and things like that, actually one guy just sent me a very thoughtful email about what some names we could use, because the best thing we can do is not reuse the name. You want like El Paso, the city is renamed Graveyard. Not because it's a graveyard, but because it's a big dusty gray horrible area. But it's still a working city.
Yeah. Just reasons that will be discovered when you play the game.
Yeah, but it's more of an aesthetic thing, much like Boneyard was for LA. But it's like all
Right.
these cities have these great other names that tend to come up afterwards. So yeah, we're always looking for suggestions as to what the name of the city is. I just went with Weird City because I assumed that there'd be all this propaganda left over, and they'd come out and not
Yeah.
understand why Austin had to be weird.
Yeah, fair enough. So our last question here before we get out. If you had a choice, sir, how long would it take you to respawn after you died?
Oh God, that's a good question. Because if you respawn instantly, you're very likely just gonna die again.
It's true, depending on the
You want
circumstances.
your murderer.
Or do you want to rest? Do you want to maybe wait 1,000 years? Do you want to? There are a lot of variables. What is your
You get
choice?
to, okay, well, this will depend on whether or not you get to go into an observer mode, like you do in a lot of games, because I could see that as being very entertaining, just kind of taking a step back
Yeah.
and watching everyone else live their lives.
Everybody has the dream about seeing their own funeral.
True. Now, that being said, though, you don't want to right away, because you don't get murdered twice. I assume it's, getting murdered is still a traumatic experience. But you definitely want to give yourself plenty of time to either A, have a funeral, or B, have your murderer get bored and leave. So, Or do I even want a funeral? I'd like to come back and be like, don't worry about it. It wasn't worth it. I'm back. Let's say
Yeah.
I'm gonna say 24 hours. Give it a day.
Fair
Give
enough.
it a day. Depending on what the afterlife is like, or if I just become like the observer in a video game. Then at the same time, I only have 24 hours to spy on people and watch people be naked. And therefore, I can only, at that point, I've only got 24 hours to be this awful person that I know I would be if I had that
Right.
ability, and then it'll stop.
Sure, it's an abuse of power, but it's only a temporary abuse of power.
Is that better that, if I'm going to be a terrible person, at least I can put a cap on how long I get to be that terrible.
Exactly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that very roundly brings us to the end of our show. I want to thank my very special guest, Christopher Means, for coming on today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you had a good time. Where can people find your stuff?
Well, now they can find it at falloutlonestar.com or falloutmagnifico.com. Now they just both tie to the same site.
Excellent. And what I think, and your Twitter handle?
I'm gonna get in so much trouble. Jackie's gonna kill me. I want to say it's. Oh shoot! Hold on. I don't know. Someone else. I know, like on Facebook, we're just Fallout Lone Star, but on Twitter, I honestly want to say we're like. What happened to Twitter? Why am I? It's all different. Give me a sec.
What do you mean?
I don't know. I just went to Twitter and it didn't come up immediately with something else. So. Oh God, she's gonna kill me. Let's see.
Ooh,
I know
you're gonna get in trouble.
Have you met Jackie? Come on.
No.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought you talked about somebody different there for a second.
No, it's no.
She has actually been on the show once before.
Oh, no kidding. I have got to watch that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It is at Fallout Lone Star. That's simple, and I'm an idiot. So,
excellent. And your personal Twitter handle
is, I believe, it should be at chris.t.means. I want to say no, it's just Chris T Means. I'm sorry, at Chris T Means. That's just my initials, and you can follow the absolute jackal that I do on Twitter.
Well, it will have been underneath you this entire time, so that way we know exactly who we've been talking to. And so Fallout Lone Star is where you can find them. Unified branding, ladies and gentlemen. It is definitely a good fucking thing.
We finally beat out Lone Star the song for Fallout. It took us forever. Whenever you put in Fallout Lone Star, and it would do. Oh, you mean Lone Star, the song that was in Fallout New Vegas? Here you go. No. Now we are now more popular than some song that was on Fallout New Vegas.
Excellent. And my name is Tim Leftwich. You've been watching this on youtube.com/Tim Leftwich. Let's see. I believe that about covers everything, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed watching this episode. We're going to do some more of these here soon. With the work schedule has kept me fairly freaking busy, which is why you haven't seen one of these in, God, way too fucking long. But I'm trying to get back into the saddle, ladies and germs, so bear with me. I really appreciate it. And as always, we'll see you next time.